Welcome everybody, and especially Blair Powless, who is in a Unitarian family. His parents were Unitarians and Blair is Unitarians, and he was our director for a while and has done lots of other wonderful things. And today he is talking about assessing racial bias in the Duluth Police Department. And he's going to focus on what discriminatory institutional practices might be present and how might a racial bias audit of the Duluth police, be undertaken.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you very much, Carol. And it's nice to see familiar faces, or as the case may be, familiar names. Let's see. I'm just going to jump right in here. As you all know, my name is Blair Powless. Family has been a part of the UUCD community since it was in the little bitty church that is now the Quaker Church. I still have memories of that basement in particular as a child. So what I'm going to be talking about today is, it may have been a little misleading in that we haven't completed a racial bias audit of the police department at this point. So I just want to be clear about that. I've been working with a group of local volunteers since approximately July, I believe is when the group started. And I jumped on maybe a month or two after that. And a petition was created after the killing of George Floyd, asking, having 4 different points that it was interested in getting the city of Duluth to get on board with, and I'll go into those in a moment. But the first thing I just want to do is make clear who we are as a group. We've been calling ourselves the Petition group. We're hoping to actually have an official name after our meeting, which will occur today at 1 o'clock. But I also want to make the point too that there's been a lot of discussion, I believe, around this issue regarding terminology, whether someone is interested in reforming the police, defunding the police, or abolishing the police. And I am going to paste into the link, into the chat a little later, an article that outlines those different positions. But so the people who are members of this group, we all have slightly different positions on terminology, but we all have the same goals. I think it's important to keep that in mind. And again, that we are a volunteer group. So a lot of work is going into this, just on our own time. So I wanted to make those points. Let me check my notes here. Okay, and just to make clear as well that my speaking with you today is my speaking with you as an individual member of this group. I'm not here saying this is what our group believes or this is what our group thinks. It comes from my perspective, and I'm not speaking for the entire group. With that, I'll ask Brett if he would put up the PowerPoint. It's a very brief PowerPoint. I'm not going to spend a lot of time walking through a PowerPoint, doing a lot of talking. I'm going to open it up for questions pretty quickly. So the petition itself has 4 basic points. The first is that the city of Duluth support a racial bias audit of the Duluth Police Department. And the manner in which these are usually conducted is that an outside agency comes in, reviews, arrest data, stop and frisk data, these types of things, and then tries to say, well, have you been, do you seem biased in the way that you're policing? Are there more people of color being stopped for different things, et cetera? So trying to get a handle on that. That's the first thing, a racial bias out of the police department. The next thing is a freeze or a halt to any future increases in the Duluth Police Department's budget. Basically asking the department to hold off on any spending in the future in order to look at some of the proposals that we have about things that it could be doing and ways that money could be directed into other public safety programs. The third one The third point is to protect and expand current investment in community-led health and safety strategies. We've been referring to this as an Office of Violence Prevention. But basically the idea that a lot of situations that police departments are asked to address, the police officers are asked to address, are mental health issues versus just, you know, direct violence issues, or issues that necessarily require someone to use force in order to deal with the situation. And that oftentimes police officers are generally trained in use of force and how to enforce the different laws, but they're not as often taught how to de-escalate situations and how to deal with mental health issues. And then the fourth point is we'd like the council to do everything in their power to compel the DPD and all law enforcement agencies to immediately cease enacting violence on community members. And that's more of just a sort of a proclamation versus any specific thing that we're asking them to do, an attitude that we would like them to embrace. Would you click to the next slide, please? Thank you very much. Again, the group has been meeting since approximately July of 2020, trying to outline processes to undertake these different points that I just mentioned in the petition. A few of our members some months back went to a few different city council members and to the mayor and said, here's this petition, here are these points. And all of them said, well, okay, so here's these points. How do we go about actually doing these things? And so that's what we've been working on as a group for approximately the last 6 to 8 months, is trying to create a document that outlines how these different points would be enacted. The draft of the proposal is in its final stages. We've gathered a lot of different information, done some research, and so we have a rough draft of the proposal, although in my opinion, it has a ways to go. As I said, we all have different opinions within this group. Some people think it's ready to go. I disagree, but we're working on that. And then another key thing that we've been doing over, I'd say, the course of the last 3 to 4 months is we've been meeting with local organizations to discuss their perspectives on this issue and their availability to collaborate with us in creating this proposal, but also supporting these different points of the petition. And that's been really interesting. Concerns. And again, these are mostly mine, just coming off of the top of my head here over the last couple of days as I developed this presentation. But public safety, all right, the issue I think is larger than just police reform. Just to say to the police department, you need to do things differently. We also need to consider the availability of proper mental health services, the availability of other services in the community that can take the place of the police department as far as responding to situations that arise that police are often called to address. Another concern is the refusal of the police union to participate. That's one thing, you know, you can come up with all these great ideas and get some city councilors on board, but the police department and the union as they work together is a very powerful organization that can, you know, just kind of put a veto on things if they don't like it. How do we get around that, or how do we go about perhaps engaging them, which comes up here later in this list. Another thing is follow-up. How do we monitor progress and make sure that changes are successfully enacted? It's one thing to submit a document and get approval on the document. It's another thing entirely to see that these things are actually done and that they're done in the manner that we would like them to be done. So, you know, looking at probably years of follow-up and how do we create a group of people who are going to work with the department to monitor their progress, et cetera. That's another concern that we have. Something else that's been coming up a lot is the rhetorical approach. And this is along the lines of the abolish, defund, or reform. do we want to confront the department? Do we want to say to them, we don't like what you're doing and you need to change? Or do we want to engage the department? Do we want to say, hey, here's some other ways that we think you could be doing things and we'd like to work with you to do these? And as you might imagine, there's a certain amount of distrust that many people have about whether or not the police department would actually even follow through on these things if they had agreed to do it, or if they were forced to do it versus brought in and engaged or worked with. And then the last point, just do we work with or do we work separately from the police department? This is a question as well. If you could move on to the next slide. Okay, so useful information. Let me open up the chat here and I will attempt to paste. Oops, did it all go in there? It appears that it did. All right, I'll hit enter and we'll see what happens. Okay, perfect. There's 3 different links that I've supplied you with. First is the petition itself as it was presented on change.org. And it lists the points that I just made. Secondly is an article on police reform, defunding, and abolition, a discussion of those different terms and what they generally mean. So you can look at that yourself. And then article that came through the UUA, and it's a bit older as well, but alternatives to calling the police. It has a really interesting 2-page sort of a chart where you can ask yourself questions, when you're considering calling the police. How, do I need to call the police under this circumstance? Could I deal with it myself? Are there other people that I could, or other people or organizations that I could reach out to for assistance with a problem or an issue that I'm having, which I think can help you to think about, well, so, what are the concerns with the police? Or do we have to call the police every single time? What are we in the habit of calling the police for? And do we need to call the police in all of those situations? So if we could move on to the last slide, and that just opens things up for discussion.